who does that kid belong to?
Well, so the darkest aspect of this is that they were going to transition from Truman to a show about his child. They were probably going to take his child away. I think that's like
It's
where the original
it's,
script is going.
it's called a spinoff.
I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David. And today, we've already seen this years ago, but we're going to fucking talk about the Truman Show. And I'm so excited.
So, Truman Show, in our long list of deciding, because we only have like 4 or 5 shots of doing this a year, right? And in our long list of deciding which movies that we've already watched, that we're going to do it this year, because it goes against our whole mantra. This, I feel like, was never like outrightly on the list, but we have just in our everyday lives have talked about this movie.
Yeah, so last year I went on a trip and I was like, oh, I'm going to watch. My hotel room had Showtime. And at that point, there were all these like A24 movies on there. I was like, oh, there's so many things to choose from. But instead of watching one of those many options of things I hadn't seen, I ended up watching Shooter with Mark Wahlberg and The Truman Show. And that was the first time I had watched The Truman Show since I became an adult. And I don't think there is another movie that I can think of that my view on has changed so drastically, in that I really liked this movie as like a kid and a teen. So this came out in what, 98? Yeah, 98. And so I would have been 11 and watched it probably a few times, cable, in the early 2000s. I hadn't seen it in forever. And I remember it just being kind of a funny movie, like interesting story, like really cool idea. And then when you watch it as an adult, it's just completely a different movie. It's sad, kind of horrifying. It's very much like now, like in the context of like the late 20 teens to now, like the YouTube reality TV like generation that we live in, like it kind of means so much more. But my view of it, like it, I don't have Letterboxd, but I think this would be in my top 4 movies, like in the conversation, because of just how much my view on it changed, how like perfect it almost is, like, and we'll talk about alternate casting at the end. This is the first dramatic role that Jim Carrey had, and I do not believe there's another person that could have done this. There's one other option, which was one of the other options, but he is perfect in this.
So you have now set me up on like 20 perfect different conversations to go off of. So thank you for that. Let me start by let me start by saying that I've only seen this movie like maybe 2 or 3 other times, and this time hit so differently because of everything you've said. We're older, number one. Number 2, in this world of social media and YouTube and everything like that, gives you a different perspective. And then number 3 is because in 1998, this is Jim Carrey's first dramatic role, even though there's a lot of funny moments for him in this movie, we do view in 2024, when we're recording this, we do view Jim Carrey as quite of a different kind of actor than we did in the 90s. We got Liar Liar. We got, and I'm not even saying, I'm not going to go through all his movies, but I'm not even saying that he hasn't done funny, silly roles after this, right? It's not like Truman Show was his last you know, kind of semi-serious, semi-comedic role. I mean, after this, I think what The Grinch came after this. Um, the
Man on the Moon was the very next thing, which is also just like,
but it's a dramatic role.
yeah, like super dramatic. And also like, have you watched that documentary, Andy and Me?
No, no, no. But what I was saying is that his funny roles after that was like The Grinch, Bruce Almighty, things like that. We still view him as a comedic actor, but he has done so much more dramatic roles since then. Also, that our view of him is quite different. And so when we watched this movie when we were kids, we because I don't think when we were kids we watched Man on the Moon, but when we were kids. um and because there's a lot of funny parts in the movie, you can still watch this movie with that layer of innocence and just see this as just a completely comedic movie. But let me tell you, when I watched it this time for the review, I just noticed how horrific it is, how depressing it is. I couldn't help but think through the entire time. I was like, well, now I know how those kids on those like YouTube family vlogs feel, right?
Right.
And there's so much pointing to that, outrightly pointing to that throughout the movie, but it's taken in such a nonchalant way that the producers or the other actors or even Christoph himself don't really see any wrong in what they're doing to Truman.
Well, and there's this little line too about how it was like a group of unwanted babies, and they don't really get into the, were they going to be given up for adoption or were they going to be, terminated? But there is this sort of idea that his life doesn't matter and it was saved. And there's also this thing where, so I wanted to get into this more towards the end.
Oh, I didn't even think about the being saved part because there's so much religious context throughout the whole movie that I didn't even think about like them like the corporation adopting him as a baby, as them looking at him as like, oh, now he's saved
And he's ours. Like
and he's out.
whatever life he has is either he wasn't going to have a life or it's better than what he would have gotten. And so he
Right.
should be grateful. The other thing is, so the original author, or the guy who wrote the screenplay, Andrew Niccol. So originally he wrote a much darker version of this, which we'll go into a little bit at the end. And he was going to direct. And I think the darkness you can't get away from, but they do try to. But so like there were all these things that like that are kind of hidden in plain sight, like the ethical dilemma about this movie isn't spelled out for you as maybe it would have been in that. But so one of the big changes is this originally was going to take place in like a New York City type place.
Mm-hmm.
Like a dystopian place. And Peter Weir, who directed this, was like kept making him rewrite it, and one of the things was putting it in this like idyllic seaside town.
The second seaside town we've done in 3 weeks of like seemingly peaceful yet horrific.
Which one? What was the other one?
The Birds.
Oh, they're the Birds. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
probably a little worse. But so there is also this sort of like, this is like the 1950s that he's living in. It kind of like when he gets out, he is sort of going to have the same existence that Brendan Fraser does in Blast from the Past, where he's picking up
Yes.
all these new things. He's like, there's just porn everywhere.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Brendan Fraser is that like he grew up knowing that there was an outside, but like his family was too scared to go outside. This is more, I feel like, closely related to Shyamalan's The Village, where they think that they're in the outside world and they think it's a certain period of time. And then she goes beyond the wall and realizes that everyone's been lying to her about where or when she's been living.
Right. No, yeah.
You've seen The Village, right? You've seen The
I
Village?
know how it. I've seen the end of it. I know how
You've
it
seen
ends. I
enough.
haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I would enjoy that one. It kind of sucks it was ruined for me, but I still think I would enjoy it. The second viewing of it. Um.
I hear there's
So
other twists and turns that keep it interesting.
yeah. So back to this one. Like, there's so many different aspects of this that you don't even really consider. Like Meryl, his wife.
Yeah.
Um. Marlon, his best friend since he was 7. They
Yeah.
took other kids and took their lives away.
Yeah,
Meryl
but
has been
David,
stuck in this.
those are just called kid actors.
Yeah, but like 24/7. Like Marlon, I guess at least gets to have like a normal life when he's not hanging out with Truman. But like Meryl, that's her entire life, and then she's also fucking this guy for a job.
Yeah. See, that's another really dark thing. Is like I think even Christoph said towards the end, he's like, I hope that we see our first
On
conception.
TV. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He won. Yeah. The other thing is like, is this channel was just created for this,
Yes.
right? And then so like at the end when the idea of I can't think of his name off the top of my head, who plays the guy who owns the TV station. Um, the idea that he's like, yeah, we should turn it off. Philip Baker Hall. The idea that he's like, yeah, let's turn it off. It's like, all right, man. But what else do you got? Like, you don't have anything else lined up.
So, second Philip Baker Hall movie in a row. Okay. I did
Right.
not realize that we were going to do this. And no, to answer everyone's question, are the rest of the movies we do this month do not have Philip Baker Hall that we know of currently.
Oh, he's in the social network.
No, he's not.
He
I thought you were
sucks
going to say, oh,
dad.
he's in
He-
Prometheus. He voices some robot or something. I didn't realize that he passed away 2 years ago.
yeah, very sad.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's all these things that I think we can get more into, like as we go through. But it's just this movie is so much more than, I guess that's kind of the overall point I want to make in the meeting. It's so much more than I thought it was when I was younger, and like it's now kind of beautiful. The one I told you before we started, and I guess this is a good way to start, is one change I was thinking about is this movie opens up the opening credits. We meet Ed Harris as Kristoff. He talks a little bit about this. We meet Marlon. We
Yeah.
meet Laura Linney, which that was the other revelation, is like Laura Linney is, she's mostly like seen as like a great actress. And it's like, I don't think we talk enough about how hot she was and still is.
She's very attractive, David, but it is hard to actually see that she's attractive in this movie because she's kind of a dick.
She's a little bit of an asshole. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
my favorite Laura Linney is Mystic River, which, spoiler alert, she's like, you know what? Yeah, you killed your friend who was innocent and he was kind of like mentally handicapped, but I'm still with you. Like that's the ride or die Laura Linney chick that you want. So,
I thought you were actually going to mention how, first of all, this is the first time we see Kristoff, and then we don't see him an hour into the movie.
I got sidetracked on Laura Linney. That was actually my point. Is I think we should not have seen him in the beginning.
I agree. And you know what? I also wonder, like, what if this movie was treated as if we as the audience were going to this not knowing what the fuck was going on with Truman? And because it kind of puts us in his head being like, okay, what the fuck is going on here? Yeah, and the twist an hour into the movie is, oh, it's a giant production. Because you're right, without the beginning, we're just kind of blindly with Truman.
And like, obviously, I guess back in '98, it would have been easier for people to be like, what's going on with this, and to be confused, and they could have made it happen. But like, so the IMDb says an insurance salesman discovers his whole life is actually a reality TV show. And it's like, I mean, that's the very fucking end of the movie. I think if you don't have Kristoff, and like, even if you have the other two interviews, like, it's almost like a reveal when he shows up in the one scene when the dad, and he's talking through Marlon, reading him lines, and then all the people in the studio are crapping. If that's the first time you see them, I think it's way more impactful. And it almost feels like, I don't know this. It feels like one of those decisions where the studio's like, you need to introduce him earlier on, or like contractually Ed Harris like needs to be introduced earlier in the movie. Although I don't think that's it. But it felt like they were like, you got to treat the audience like they're dumber, and you have to introduce this guy early on so they know what's happening. And that, I think that's the one change I would make.
It's just really curious. Yeah, that's what that's what really gets it from a 94% to 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. That change. Yeah, man, one thing that really like I focused in on, because we're not the only people who love this movie on the internet. I've been seeing a lot of clips circulating around like YouTube shorts and reels of just like not only just clips of the movie, but then like people would be like, hidden cameras are all around the Truman Show, and like secrets you didn't know about the Truman Show. And then it's just like the most basic fucking fact that you can get if you just watch it once, right? Like that sort of shit. And so people fucking love this movie. I was gonna say this show.
One fact that you brought up to me was, all the cameras, and you were talking about his Ring camera.
Yeah.
That's his dad's ring. Did you know that?
No.
So that's his dad's ring, and apparently his dad gives it to him right before he dies. So then they have a way of tracking him easier because there's a camera in that ring. And then when his dad comes back, he gives his dad his ring back, and so that's why he's able to escape on the boat, and they aren't able to find him.
Which I didn't even realize that.
Apparently there are like a ton of really good deleted scenes. Like I guess at one point he goes past someone in a wheelchair, and then like the next day he sees that person jogging, and he's kind of like, wait, what the fuck? That's the same person. Things like that. And the other funny thing is when this movie starts, as you get older, you're like, are they really bad at this? Because like a fucking light falls, like the elevator thing, like all like the radio up.
So what I was thinking, right? What I was thinking about that light falling is kind of like an actual act of God, right? Because it's a huge fucking set.
Right.
There is probably in the past lights that have fallen in other places that Truman was like nowhere near, or like in the middle of the night when he's dead asleep, right?
Or as a kid, they explain it away.
Right, exactly. Stupid child. And so it's kind of like that's the inside, and that happens like 5 minutes into the movie. That happens right away into the movie. And it's kind of like the inciting incident that kind of kicks off his entire like peeling back his veil on his own reality.
This is also a super tight movie. It's an hour and 43 minutes. The last 20 minutes he's on the boat. The last 30 minutes he's escaping and on the boat. You know what I mean? Like, so the beginning part of this, setting up that ending, is hour and 10 minutes, and it's like, perfect.
And one thing that it is perfect.
Well, and what's funny too is, so this next little bit reminds me of like V for Vendetta. So he gets in the car.
Okay.
He gets in the car, and the radio is immediately like propagandizing what he just saw. So like in V for Vendetta, they blow up the Bailey, and the news comes on like, oh, it was a crew that was destroying it. And so they were just having a little fun by playing music. And like the radio is like, oh, wow, that satellite fell like off a plane part. And like, oh, that's crazy. And like they keep going. You know what I mean? Just
what's crazy too?
Immediately fixing like their mistakes so he doesn't find out.
What's insane too is because they had complete control of him as a child, right? His learning and his, schooling and everything like that. The fact that there are hidden cameras everywhere. He walks down the street and there's like signposts, and each side of the rectangular signpost has a camera on it, right? And when he goes to get onto you remember the kind of in like the middle of the movie, he decides to buy a ferry ticket.
Yes.
and he goes onto the harbor to buy the ferry ticket. On the harbor sign, there's a camera, right? And it's those like black circular security cameras. We know what that looks like, right?
Right.
We know what a studio light looks like. But if he never had a way of knowing what that looks like, they could literally tell him anything that they want him to think that thing is.
Well, they don't have to tell him anything, right? They can just, it's just way that's the way a light post looks. You know what I mean? There's nothing.
No. I mean, exactly. At a bigger scale, that's exactly my point.
So then after that, the radio sort of is just talking to him. They're like, "So how are you guys doing today?" And he's like, "Oh, doing great." And he's like, "Oh, that's great to hear." You know what I mean? Like just like back and forth, which is very funny. It also made me think like these people have to have earpieces, like, or like how are they're hearing Christoph, a lot of them. And Truman never
Not
notices
all of
that.
them. Not all of them.
Well, Marlon's getting lines read to him. Like a lot of them.
Yeah, but that's only when so I thought about this. Certain people are getting lines read to them when they're trying to get Truman kind of back on track.
Right.
But you don't consider. Oh man, that's another thing I want to explore. Hold on, I just have another thought. You don't consider the fact that most of their days are probably already scripted out and they get handed it to them before they walk onto set the next
But at the
morning.
end, but remember when the movie's about to end, they're like, "All right, everyone to first positions," and everyone goes to first positions. Like they're all getting that told to them. They're searching for Truman,
Right,
and they're like,
but I mean, it could be done over like a loudspeaker or something.
"No," because Truman would hear it.
Maybe
They're
it's
all
just
where
told
they
to
are all
one
they are.
guy.
Christoph can talk to every single person on that because I mean he is God to this thing. He controls it. Like so they are wearing something, and that movie doesn't address it for obvious reasons, but
So the other thing that I just thought of real quick is, do they keep the time of day it is like in sync with what's going on out there, or do they shoot this at night because it's live, right? So every time we cut to someone, which I want to talk about that, every time we cut to someone like a normal fucking person watching the Truman Show, they're watching it live. Whether within the Truman Show, it's noon, 7:00 in the morning, or 7:00 at night. And this where we watch them, first of all, it feels like a day, right? Because like the waitresses in the Truman bar are like still working the same shift with the guy in the bathtub still taking the same bath and like, whatever. But that all feels like evening, like it's an evening show. So like from the time where he wakes up, which is in his head like 7 in the morning, maybe they start his day at 7 p.m. when everyone's coming home from work or whatnot.
Well, no, because this is like a worldwide phenomenon. So people are watching it at different points.
Oh, you're right. Shit.
I actually think, so this is shot in a town on the panhandle of Florida. And I think that's where Truman thinks they're set up because he's like, "Oh, we're going to drive to Chicago. Oh, we're going to drive to New Orleans at that one point." So that would kind of make the most sense of where that would be, is they just sort of placed it where it actually is when they filmed it.
But that's kind of insane too, right? Because it's like China. They can tell him exactly what they want him to think about the geography of the world. Like if they told him and taught him in school, "Hey, Sea Haven is the only town in the world and there's no other town," then he'll just believe that.
Yeah, which is an interesting, like, why did they? I guess they didn't think it through. They didn't.
Why did they put in like countries like Fiji and yeah.
Well, I think it kind of shows the hubris of Christoph that he was like, "I can control it. Like, he's going to just believe me because I've created this perfect place. Why would he want to leave?" And so like at the end, he's like, "Why is he fighting against this perfection I created for him? He doesn't want to leave, so I'm going to kill him."
No, you're right, because of the hubris of Christoph, in which that if Christoph thinks he's God, then why not make it like the world in his image, the world that already exists, right?
Okay,
Like
and he has these.
why choose a different collage of continents or whatever he wants if he can't do what God did, you know?
And he makes all these comments too about how it's like better in here, it's worse out there, and kind of very similar to like Blast from the Past type stuff. He grabs some fashion magazine, which just I had the thought of like, how many times did they have to turn the camera away from this kid as a like a preteen and teenager jerking off, and like all the
No,
audience is like,
actually,
well, we know what's happening there.
that's like really, really dark, right? Because like,
Yes, he's a kid.
no, not even that, dude. But like, as an adult, like he's not privy to his own secrets, privacy, and thought.
Well, he yells at him like, you never had a camera in my mind, but yeah, he never
You know,
like,
when he has that in the basement, he tries to keep it from Laura Linney, but he has that like secret trunk that he keeps all his
and they
things
call it
in.
his trash.
Right. But do you know how we get that camera angle of what's inside the trunk? Did you think about that?
Was it his ring? Probably.
No, I thought that at first. There's a compass on the so when he opens up the trunk, there's like the back end of the top of it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a map that's like plastered to the top of the inside of the trunk, and on there is a compass, and the compass has a camera in it.
Well, I mean, consider this. They would probably something would happen, and they're like, "Oh, a camera broke, or a camera's obstructed. Oh, he's created this box. We don't have a view of that anymore." He would go to work, and they would send people to go into his house
Yep.
to fix things, to fix cameras, to positions and stuff like that.
He has a lock on that trunk that he thinks that he's the only one who knows what the combination of the lock is. But the whole
entire
fucking world knows it. How horrible is that? How awful is that?
We are gonna have to move.
Disheartening.
We are gonna have to move a little bit quicker. So he goes to work, and
This is my show. I want to talk about it as much as I want. Okay.
yeah, okay. This is all about you. But he goes to work. We see a normal day. Him driving in, all these people, the twins that continue to talk to him. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna buy a policy. Oh, next week."
As a kid, I never got why they pushed him up against that sign. I was like, why are these old men so like fucking rude? But it's the advertising in the background.
Right. But then at work, his like the guy he works with is like, "Hey man, you're kind of in trouble of getting fired, and you need to go to this island, and like, but we know you're not going to go because you're scared." I was like, why are they creating this like hardship for him? Are they trying to remind him that he can't leave? Which we thought the inciting incident was his dad. That hasn't happened yet, but it's like, why are they making his life artificially tough? He can't sell insurance. They're like, "Oh, you have to go to this place that you're too scared to go to." Like, why are they doing that? It kind of doesn't make sense.
No, I agree with you, and I and I like what like Christoph says. It's like it's perfect in here. It's bad out there. Then why put if that's the kind of world you want to create for him? Then why put up any obstacles?
Right, just make his life kind of perfect. So next we get Laura Linney doing the ad reads. Every time that's funny to me. And then he kind of has this conversation with Marlon about getting out, and he's like, "Where would you go?" He's like, "I want to go to Fiji." And Marlon's like, that's fucking weird. Like, but everyone knows why he wants to go to Fiji. He thinks he's being mysterious about wanting to go to Fiji. Everyone knows that's why.
But think about how disheartening it is for Laura Linney's character, right? Like he's making a collage.
She doesn't love him. She doesn't give a fuck about him.
You don't think like at all?
No. And I think also because like at the time she is trying to woo him, she knows like, oh, he doesn't love me. He loves this other person. And the fucked up thing too is like this show tries to keep this girl away from him, but they love the hits they get, like the views they get on this like taboo relationship that he wasn't allowed to have. They play fucking recaps of it for the audience. When things get boring, they're like, "Oh yeah, here's this watch this tape back." And there's also this scene.
One of my favorite things. I'm sorry. One of my favorite things that they do is off of what you were just saying. where when he opens the trunk and he pulls out her like Letterman jacket or whatever it is, her sweater, her high school uniform sweater. He, they put in the effect. I don't know who it is, Paul Giamatti or Christoph or one of the other, editors in the moon base. But they put in like the flashback effect, and then they just like, if you guys don't know, 15 years ago when he was in high school, they do like in a movie where you have like the flashback, but it's this guy's real fucking life. And they can do that like right when he's about to go to sleep, right? Because that's better to show that than him sleeping.
Well, yeah, but as Christoph says, like people even love to watch him sleep or like have him sleeping while they sleep. It's comforting to them. So then he goes to the beach and the thing where it just rains right on him, and then he moves and it's off of him. He moves and then finally it all downpours, and it's like, what was that about? Like, is that another fuck up? And like you're trying to fix it by like, instead of, oh, we can't turn them all on, we got to move it on him. Like, it's just very funny. And it's like, are they always making mistakes? Could you hire a better crew? Do you think like the crew that works the days then comes in like and is like talking shit to the night crew? Like, what the fuck was the rain thing last night? What was that? What happened?
I actually would have liked to seen a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's funny when I'm watching this, I'm watching on my laptop, right? And the light falls down and he looks up in the sky, and I paused it and I'm like, I'm going to find the fucking hole. Find the fucking hole in this, in the sky. And I was like, I found it. There's like a tiny little black dot all the way up in the sky when Truman looks up. And then I realized that I wiped off my screen and it was just like a little piece of like debris on my screen.
Well, so in the original trailer, they actually have the hole. And like, I guess it was either a deleted scene or a cut or whatever, just for trailer purposes. But like, there's a lot of stuff that appeared in trailers that didn't appear in this. That being one.
I mean, there could have been a hole, but the one I was looking at was just like a trash on my screen.
Yeah, well, you fixed it. So, and then there's kind of like a little bit of like a, they might be having sex, and then the guys in the security booth are like, oh, they never show anything anyway. They always cut away or whatever. It's like, yeah, we want to see him fuck.
I want to know if you have any, and maybe this is just like a weird thing to look into, but what were their choices in showing certain audience members, right? Because we see mostly Americans or Canadians. I mean, they're always English speakers, apart from like maybe I think we see
there's some Japanese.
We see like an international base audience, but we see the diner waitresses, we see the security guards, we see the guy in the bathtub, we see the two old women. And I was just wondering throughout the viewing of this film, it's why those people specifically.
I loved that part of it. I think they just chose like interesting people, like the guy in the bathtub. They're showing you a guy that like constantly, all he does is sit in the tub all day and watch this. Like, we don't even see him take breaks. It kind of shows you like the fanaticism of these people that love.
I guess you're right, because you have like the guy in the bathtub, the waitresses at the Truman themed bar and restaurant, right? There's one line where they're watching the Truman Show and something is happening. I think it's the ending where it's so intense, right? And the cops are like, hey, we have a booking, right? And they're like, just leave him in the car for now. We need to finish this segment of Truman Show.
Right.
They just left a criminal in the back of a police squad car because they're so into what's happening.
By the way, the Japanese family, the guy in the middle, I'm very confident, I couldn't find it, but I'm pretty sure he is in Karate Kid 2 or 3, the one where they go to Japan. I think it's 2. He's like the main bad guy that Ralph Macchio has to fight. So, right. For anyone else who saw that. Next day, he runs into his homeless dad, and then a man and a woman grab him and take him on the bus. They have all these bystanders just ready to get in Truman's way. in case something bad happens. That on the go, people like marathon runners, there's the wheelchair people in the hospital the next day.
Yeah.
Things go so poorly in this town that they're constantly prepared for it with extras to prevent him from seeing things.
So in the beginning where they're like, this is how many days that the Truman Show has gone on air
10,000
without
10,909.
909 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That puts him, I believe, a couple weeks, 3 weeks before his 30th birthday.
Right.
And it is kind of like it is kind of. So I want to talk about the religious connotations now, right? So Christ, right? Christ of Christ, and he's God, right? And then you have like Paul Giamatti and like the entire crew up there is kind of acting like his angels, right? So you got heaven. And then you have fucking Jesus Christ with Truman Burbank, right? Truman Burbank is his name.
Yeah, because he's a true man, and it's in
He's
Burbank.
a true man, yeah. And the just him talking to him at the end is like literally he's looking up and Christoph is just talking to him like God. Did you notice that when he's on the sailboat after the storm, he's like laying down on the mast of the sailboat, like in a crucified. Yeah. It's so. There is constantly throughout that movie one thing that really like a line that I never really noticed but really haunted me this time watching was when his mom was going through the family photo albums.
Yeah.
And there's a little picture of him dressed as a clown behind like a baby gate.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, my little clown." And that's what he is to the whole fucking world.
Yeah. You went from Jesus to clowns, like in one.
I don't know. I my mind is everywhere on this movie because even though there is a lot of like religious subliminal messages, there's also like this whole thing where when he is acting out of order, they treat him like a wild animal. And did you notice like how Close Encounters of the Third Kind reference when he goes like on the outer stretches of town, there's like the guys in like hazmat suits.
Yeah. So he sees his dad, and then you see the unattended dog with the chain just running by because that woman left the dog to go grab the dad. And then the mom just gaslights him and then is like, and I don't blame you for your father's death, which is crazy because like we only see her like 2 other times. And one of the other times she is like, "Oh, he'll come to me if he hears my voice. He just needs to hear me say, Truman." And it's like, you're a bitch. Like, no one likes you. Like, you're just as, like, he thinks you're his mom, but like, once he realizes everything, like, you're out of his life. You know what I mean? He's not going to care about you. It's just very interesting.
When she's like showing them the wedding album and she's like, "Oh, plenty of pictures in the back. When am I going to have a grandchild, Truman? Give me a grandchild." I'm like, how sick is that? It's not her grand. And then who does that kid belong to?
Well, so the darkest aspect of this is that they were going to transition from Truman to a show about his child. They were probably going to take his child away. I think that's like where the original script is going.
It's called a spinoff.
Yeah, a second channel. Which means they're probably going to say, "Oh, your child died."
Why wouldn't they just let him raise his kid within the universe?
Because then you can't have you can't have a second channel.
You think that's what they? I mean, there's probably what would have been a cool like twist ending of this movie is at the end when Truman escapes. They're like, "Okay, let's move to camera 2." And as us watching, we're like, "What do you mean camera 2?" And it's a whole nother studio with a whole nother 30-year-old, and they're just like doing the same thing to him. That would have been a fascinating ending.
Quit trying to rewrite things. So we need to move a little quicker.
Just spent the whole beginning of this episode rewriting it.
So next, we're introduced to Lauren / Sylvia. And, we can talk about all of it, but really the library scene is kind of the one that sticks out. And she's like, I'm not allowed to talk to you. And then he asks her out, and she's like, we have to go right now. And what's really interesting is if they just left her alone, she seemed like she was just going to be with him. Like, and then as soon as she's like, oh, someone's coming to take me away, she's like, people are watching you, which she doesn't really spell it out very well. Like, you're on TV, this life isn't real. But she's like, people are watching you. It's not private, da 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 da. And then the fake dad, just sort of takes her away.
The story of schizophrenia and you're not the first boyfriend that she's done this to is evil, but genius.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a Paul Giamatti rewrite in real time right there.
Well, and it's also, Christoph does this thing about, like he has free will, he can make decisions or whatever. But it's then like they just put an authority figure in the way. And it's like, is he going to fucking fight this guy that's her dad?
So,
you know what I mean?
So that's true. Did you notice that every time he goes for the magazine, there's like always a guy, like a mysterious guy reading a newspaper, like right behind him every time?
Yeah, I think it's just a camera view.
I don't know, because when he gets suspicious, he looks at the guy looking at him. I love when he runs away with Laura Linney to the hazmat suit guys, right? Before you get where they basically like box him in like some sort of rabid animal. But the fake cop that's hired to tell them to turn back is like, okay, you have a good day, Truman.
And that's the realization.
If that was the first thing that happened to him before the radio in the car, before the light falling down, before everything else is, he probably really wouldn't have thought anything of it, because in this town, everyone knows each other. Everyone is the thing, right? But that's like the thing where it's like, but I'm not in town.
I'm on the outskirts.
I'm outside of town. I've never met that guy in my life. Then it all kind of clicks.
Well, the other thing too that's kind of interesting is when he runs into the forest, the trees are all evenly spaced out in like a pattern, which it's like, that's not a real forest. It's like a tree farm made for this, the fake nature of this.
Yeah.
So I think we can go through these kind of quickly because these are all just like him noticing things. But he's driving in the next day. The radio fucks up. And then, he hears the directions. And then it changes. They're like, oh shit, change frequencies. And then they like, keep moving. But this is like, he sees everything with a new eye. He starts, instead of going into work, he sits down. He starts watching things. He sees the guys that you said is following him. Then he goes into the different building. And you're like, why wouldn't they just make this a real building? Why would they make it this way? Like, they could have underground tunnels for people to get out and like, go have a coffee break. They didn't have to make it like that, or have them upstairs.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the point where they're doing this, and they've had 30 years to like build out this set thoroughly, right? Like, you don't need a fully fleshed out town when he's 5 years old, because he's mostly going to stay in his own house anyways, right?
Right.
So then, as he's becoming older and a teenager and then a full grown, where did you think he went in-state college?
I think there's a college in town. Yeah, he went to Seahaven U.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think he studied?
Well, he's an insurance guy, right?
So that's what he just got a business degree.
It's kind of genius. It's kind of genius to put him in the line of life insurance, because it's like a risk analyst sort of thing. One of my favorite details is when he's in the travel agency and there's the poster of the airplane being struck by lightning, and it's like, it could happen to you.
Well, it's just to cover the travel agency real quick. When she walks in, she's wearing a bib, and I thought, oh, she's getting back from lunch, or she was eating in the back. So they never.
That's a makeup.
It's a makeup bib, and they never have someone in this store, because why would he go into this store?
Right.
So it's a storefront that they built, but then like, oh fuck, no one works here. We got to send someone to work here. So, he then meets Marlon at the convenience store, and it's like strange shit is happening. He does like the screaming in the store and clapping. He's like, okay, I'll talk to you later. And then he's talking to Marlon later about how, like, oh, when you went for that summer vacation, you know, when we were younger, and oh, when you went and like, there's a scene later on where he's like, oh, you went and sold chicken, you know, in different cities or whatever. It's like, oh, that was this actor's vacation time because they can't expect him to be here all the
No,
time.
he got booked for another show, and so he had to go and shoot that movie.
You got to know when you take this job, this is your only job ever. You're not, people aren't hiring you for anything else.
It is kind of funny how if people in his life in the town do go missing for like months at a time, you have to put up a thing where it's like, oh, they're on a sabbatical, or they're on like a mission trip or something like that, you know?
Right. So the funny scene, you know, you already talked about when he's looking at the photo album and his wife is crossing her fingers. But the Mount Rushmore thing, he's like, damn, that looks really small. She's like, oh yeah, the photos, it's a weird photo.
Yeah, he's like, things look bigger when you're younger. Anyways, moving on. The other thing about like the cross the fingers thing is like, I really thought that as a kid watching this, that did annul a marriage.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do anything. Her whole fingers crossed things absolutely means nothing if there's no official document signed.
Yeah, like the whole ceremony means nothing unless they actually signed it. Not only did they have to sign it, they had to give it in to the state authority to recognize it afterwards.
Right. And then it's not even like their actual names. It's not like Meryl's real name.
Correct, yeah. Which is, I don't know, why wouldn't you just use your real name? It'd just be easier for you to use your real name so you don't mess up.
That's true too. Like everyone just uses their real name and no one
like if you needed to change your last name because you're all part of a family or something, that would make sense. But like, you don't call Meryl if her actual name is, her name's Hannah. Just call her fucking Hannah. Right. I don't know. It says on IMDb her name is Hannah. I don't remember them using her actual name, but maybe they did.
They did in the beginning when they were showing the credits.
Oh, that's right. So he then follows her to work because she's acting weird. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, I'll be crossing my fingers for you. And then the look she gives is like, oh shit. She's like,
it's like knows. That meme, like he knows. He knows.
So follows her to the hospital. The one lady is like, stops him in the surgery stuff. And then he's like, just tell her I'm going to Fiji. And then he immediately goes. The fucking wheelchairs, he gets past them. The one guy with the thing, he's like, oh, let me help you, and pushes it past them. The doctor doing surgery, he's like, oh, okay, I'll make the cut here. And the lady wakes up. She's like, what the fuck? You're going to cut me?
No, he like hits like a bedpan or something, and it makes a loud noise, and she's startled up. Yeah. The woman, the first nurse that he runs into is like an actual like good actress. Like, have you noticed that there's like times where they have like people who have to be like a bigger role in Truman's life is an actual like good actor, and then all the extras are just kind of like, you know, you I wonder if there was even like you in a competition to be an extra on the Truman Show this episode or something like that.
Maybe, but he also couldn't take a chance of one of them fucking it up, like revealing things.
Like the guy who like hang glides in, or like the guy who jumps out of his Christmas present. What do you think about him catching the bus to Chicago? And then the guy doesn't know how to drive a bus. And then it's the same guy who doesn't know how to drive the steamboat because he's a fucking actor. But then when you look in the bus, you have like the nuns, the military guys. I'm like, those extras are like day extras.
They just sit there all day. Just sit in that fucking bus all day, playing on their phones or whatever. Yeah, so he goes.
This was 1998. I don't know if they were playing on their phones.
They were playing Snake. Yeah, they don't even have that. So goes to travel agent, goes to buy a bus, and then one of my favorite scenes is the scene with Meryl in the car when she comes home, and like, you know, the neighbor is like, "Hey, where are you gonna fix this?" She gets in the car with him, and he's like, "There's gonna be a lady walking, someone with flowers, and then a dented VW Beetle." And they all happened. I was like, well, why didn't they just turn off? Why didn't, when he said that, Christoph was like, all right, fucking turn off. You know what I mean? Maybe Christoph wasn't working at that time or whatever, but he should have. Then when
It'd
he's
be
like,
interesting if there wasn't any like they have no way of knowing what he's whispering to her at the time. I don't
or
know.
it's not like live enough. I don't know. So she's like, I know what you're upset about Fiji. So why don't you save for a few months and then you can go. And he's like, I'm ready to go now. The way he like goes around that roundabout he's like, oh, there's traffic at this time of day. What are the odds? And then goes around again and comes back. He's like, the traffic's gone. Look at that.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Only to then get to the bridge, and she's just like, you knew this would happen. Like,
Yeah.
let's just turn around, and then him making her grab the wheel. And there's this moment when she grabs the wheel, she's scared. She gets over, and she's like kind of excited. She's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
we
yeah.
did it. Like we're a team. Like we did it. Like this, almost this bonding moment with him. It's pretty interesting.
I remember the first time I watched this movie, I thought she was going to partner up with him and help him escape.
Like a buddy movie. Like, I don't love you, but yeah, we can do this as friends.
Yeah.
And then they drive through the fire, and then she's like, "What? We're just gonna use your savings in New Orleans? We're just gonna blow through it? I'm gonna have to call your mom." And then there's just a nuclear power station that they've just prepared for this. They're like, "All right, we have to have backup upon backup."
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like plan B, C, D, E, F. It's like, you know what? Just in case he gets to the outer limits, we have an impossible situation. And I do like, have you noticed that when they raise him, they have him in positions where he has to obey authority figures?
Yep.
So they make him subordinate and scared of certain authority figures in order to control him, which I find interesting. Was it ever explained why the dad just showed up out of nowhere and basically caused all this?
Christoph says it thinks because he like wanted a paycheck, like he was like missing out on the money from being, they had to kill him, and he was like annoyed about it, so he came back.
You know what would have been really interesting if that was what he told the media, but the reality is he wanted this to make it more dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, possibility, because he is like a liar. Do you think there's like a deleted scene where that cop that said, "No problem, Truman," they bring him up to Christoph, and Christoph just like fucking slaps him and is like, "Do you know what you just did? Do you know how much you fucked this up?"
What one scene that like is just horrible and awful is when they are caging him in like a wild animal with a net and the guns and the stuff in the forest, like he's some sort of rabid creature.
He
And
is.
it's like
To them, he
that.
is.
Yeah, to them he is when he's not. It reminded me of that scene in oh man, it was like a circus thing, right? When like the elephants or the bear, you know, does what they're supposed to do in the circus thing, but then as soon as they like show any signs of being a normal elephant or a normal bear, they're like immediately put down.
Right. Yeah. Well, in this case, they can't put him down because they put a lot of money into owning this guy.
Christoph thinks he can. Well, he says at the end, he's like, if I can show them being born on screen, I can show him dying on screen.
Yeah, but sort of as like a last resort. So one of the scenes I love is when they get back home and they just sort of have it out, and he's like, "Why do you want a baby? Like you can't stand me. Like you don't love me." And then she does an ad read, and his line reading of like, "What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?" And then he's like, "You're a part of this." And then he grabs her, and she's like, "Do something." And he's like, "Who are you talking to?" And then they send Marlon to come over, and she's like, "I
I
can't.
can't work under these conditions.
It's unprofessional." And like that is the last time we see her in this. Do you think her and Marlon banged?
Oh, oh yeah. You know what's even interesting is if you're Marlon, if you're the actor, right?
Yeah.
You notice that his best friend's name is Marlon and hers is Meryl. Was there something they were trying to do with the M's in his life?
I don't think so. I don't know where you're getting at.
I don't know. No, but what I was
You're
saying
like
is that
fucking Charlie Daying it right now.
no, I am. I'm like, here's my board and my string. Do you think that when the actor gets a wife, like Marlon's actual wife, They could just bring her on set. Like, this is just where you live with your children now.
Yeah, I feel like you should, right? Like why does he have to be with that one woman who like just because she works there too? They got to make sure that someone has like good acting skills, I guess.
Good acting skills. You have to sign an NDA, probably, right? Like, you have to be under contract for a certain amount of time. And there's probably not a lot of people who even want this job.
Yeah. By the way, uh the Japanese guy in the family, Yuji Okamoto, who was in The Karate Kid Part 2. He was also Saito's assistant in Inception, and he was Pete from Johnny Tsunami. So I had to talk about my guy a little bit, you know what I mean? So next we have the scene with Marlon where, yeah, he's having his lines read to him by Kristoff, and then the dad is introduced. And I was reading a lot of people see that dad introduced as like sort of fake tears from Truman because he's not like happy his dad's come back, but he's realizing, oh, I was right about this conspiracy. Like something's going on here, which is, pretty not spelled out, but I think probably the right answer.
So it's not really fake tears. They're real tears for like a different reason.
Sure.
Yeah. I have another conspiracy theory, and this is just me. This is just my own, my lonesome. Marlon is giving him this really heart to heart, and he starts tearing up at like the beautiful words that Paul Giamatti are telling Marlon to tell him, right?
Well, it's Kristoff, right?
Or Christoph, whatever. And I think before the dad shows up, Truman really didn't want to believe that Marlon was in on it. And then I think that's him actually realizing that Marlon was in on it.
There's also apparently deleted scenes where like Marlon kind of redeems himself as like really caring about Truman, and like I guess he like finds him hiding at one point and like pretends he doesn't see him or something like that, which is like,
ooh, interesting.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
See, I thought that was gonna happen, but with Laura Linney's character.
Yeah, well, Laura Linney didn't give a shit about our boy. Next we get the Kristoff interview, and this is a little like, I'm admitting something here. So when I was a child, when I watched this, they say, the Truman compound next to the Great Wall of China are the only things visible from space. I heard that as this compound was built next to the Great Wall of China. I thought this took place in China. And it was only upon watching it today that I realized that this was built in Burbank, California.
It was today? It was today that you realized that? You know what's funny is that nowadays, something like this would have been shot in China for the tax reason.
Because I was like, oh, the only way they can get away with owning a human being, clearly California wouldn't let you do that. But no, yeah. So I just completely... And it was
have you heard of Harvey Weinstein? Of course California would let you do that.
And zing. But like, and if, of course I should have caught it earlier, but it was like so ingrained that like, oh yeah, that's just where this takes place. And so I was like confused by other things. And then this time I was like, oh, of course. But also it just leads me to be like, how fucking much land did they buy just above the Hollywood sign? Like, how did they build this fucking thing? Like the property value?
No. You don't understand. They had to give Truman the last name Burbank because they took over Burbank.
Clearly. I don't know where Jay Leno's doing the Tonight Show, though, if they just took over all of Burbank.
There is no Jay Leno Tonight Show. It's only Truman Show now.
Yeah. He's like, this is my
the channel. The channel, what is it? NBC or whatever, the channel that was airing the Tonight Show, that's the Truman Channel
now. Possibly. Who might have?
Could you imagine too, like, not even the materials to make the towns and the road, not even the materials to make the fucking dome. But can you imagine how many lights and cameras needed to be produced to put this thing on?
Yeah, I mean, it's like billions and billions of dollars. Like, it doesn't even make sense that you could build this thing. Um, but here, neither here nor there. So, did you recognize Harry Shearer, the interviewer, who I think is just perfect as like a, like the Talking Dead type guy, where it's like he's clearly paid by the show to be an interviewer and a guy that talks about this. So, like all of his questions, he's like, "Oh, that's a great answer." Oh, like kind of fluffing this guy. Do you know we've done a Harry Shearer movie? Do you know which one it was?
Oh, we did. This is Spinal Tap.
Yeah, I'm glad you just pulled that from your brain and not looking it up, you dick. I like
Well, I also okay, that is true. I did just look it up, but I did want to see. He is Mr. Burns from The Simpsons,
He is like 1,000 voices on The Simpsons. He is a ton of
but
the voices.
Mr. Burns to do this interview is kind of like the perfect person to do this interview.
Yeah, I guess, but he's also Ned Flanders. He's Principal. He's Kent Brockman. He's others. So, anyway, there's also a line where he's like, "Oh, and thank you for doing this interview. We know how much you value your privacy." As he's making money off the backs of the most unprivate person like in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
So, and then they talk about like all these close calls, and then they're like writing Kirk back in. That's a master stroke. How are you going to pull it off? And he's like, amnesia. And he's like, brilliant, brilliant.
We've actually done quite a few Harry Shearer's movies. Jaws being one of them, and My Best Friend's Wedding being another.
I love when you stop doing the pod to research.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It is.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
So now when we get paid. So now when she calls in, first of all, there's this line about like, oh, we have a call from The Hague, where they prosecute war crimes, or crimes against humanity. So then they have Lauren call in, Sylvia, whatever, and she's like, the back of her apartment is so cool. You have this like free Truman rally poster and like all this. So she's clearly not living in China. She's living in Hollywood, California. And
right.
I don't know. It's just like the detail that went into her apartment is pretty cool. And then, then he gives all this bullshit of like, he says Truman could leave at any time, but he, prefers his cell, as you call it. And like, you're just mad because like you didn't get your 15 minutes and la da 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 or whatever. And then he goes on about how Meryl is leaving and we're going to find a new romance, which we meet that lady like very quickly after.
Very hot lady too.
She is good.
Let me ask you, if you knew that your whole life was a lie, but also she had to marry you and bang you, would you just stay in Sea Haven?
I don't know. Once you know, it feels a little rapey, don't you think? Like,
that's true too. That's true too. I mean, really, in Christoph's like logical sense, like how at that point he's trying to still convince Truman to come back. How would you honestly get him to?
That makes no sense.
How would it be the same?
That ending makes no sense. Like, hey, you could stay. It's like he knows everything. What? Like, why you don't even have a show anymore? It's kind of at that point.
No, but that's the whole.
It's a control thing.
Of the show. That's the whole point of the show. Is that even there was like a complaint in the beginning that was like, oh, there's I think it's an interview with the actor who plays Marlon. Is like there's nothing real, and it's like no. Everything in Sea Haven, everything in the Truman Show is real because Truman is real.
Right.
But once he knows, it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be anymore. So, the next scene we get after he meets, we have a montage of him having a normal day, which in hindsight is him, getting them off his back. So he clearly knows pretty well what's going on, that he's being watched, and so he's like, I have to get the heat off me. So he has a normal day, meets that new lady, and then it gets to the nighttime. And I love Paul Giamatti is like instructing the kid, the other guy, and Christoph walks in. He's like, I was just trying to train them. Yeah, okay, whatever. I'll get back to my job.
Yeah. I mean, actually what they've given to like the quote unquote extras, I'm not calling Paul Giamatti an extra, but like in the grand scheme of in the grand scheme of screen time, try saying that 3 times fast. Paul Giamatti is a lesser character in this movie. And even like the people watching the Truman Show that we cut back to, the amount of like personality that is given to everyone is actually quite incredible.
One of the most brilliant parts of this is showing the audience people watching. Like the guy in the bathtub, the bar that's built around this show, for 30 years, is pretty great. So then Christoph notices like, oh, this is weird. He's sleeping down there. I need, we can't. He's perfectly blocked all the cameras. And then Christoph gets super pissed at Paul Giamatti because he doesn't notice a hand going underneath the table sneaking out. Like, what?
You know what would be funny is if there's like a Truman Show hotline, because there's like a billion people watching this guy, right? If they're getting calls and they're like, you guys know that like an hour and a half ago he fucking snuck out of there.
Well, that'd be more likely now, but back then, like, you VHS record it and you just happen to have someone who caught that, it's less likely.
I guess. I mean, especially if it's in the middle of the night and everyone's sleeping, right?
Well, except in other countries, they're not, time differences and what. So they send Marlon over there, searching around. Yeah, keep it playful. And then he digs up through the hole and he's like, don't look at the camera, just keep it going. And he's like, he's gone. And the way he cuts transmission. And it's like, this is the first time in almost 30 years that this has happened.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Yeah. And I like the comment, we're actually getting more views without a transmission than we did with it playing.
But there's no product placement, so like,
Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're not getting. That's what they should have done instead of like, oh, well, please stand by for a technical error. They should just start playing ads.
It'd be funny in an alternate universe where they never catch him. They never think to look at the sea. He just hits the wall, walks up, goes outside, and then just like random people see him in Hollywood just walking around like, what the fuck? How'd you get out?
Yeah. They're like, is that Jim Carrey? What?
So when they're all looking for him, and then Christoph just decides to cue the sun, and then just the sun, and they're like, you can't do that. And everyone's like, what the fuck is going on here?
Well, even before that, they turn the moon into a fucking spotlight. I'm like, it's over. The jig is up. You might as well just call it quits now, Well,
if the rain in one section didn't bother him earlier, maybe the moonlight, wouldn't either.
Yeah, I guess they could always explain it away, right? Some guy on TV pops up in front of Truman and is like, yeah, weird lunar solar eclipse happened and it radiated the sun's rays very precisely onto the beach of Sea Haven, right? Yeah, but when the sun pops up and everyone's like, what time is it? 4 a.m? Like, what the fuck?
And then, having that guy who couldn't drive the bus to explain that no one can drive a boat is really like a smart idea.
Really good. Really good.
And so then they have to send a storm and he makes it worse and worse. And you have the part where Paul Giamatti's like, I'm not doing it anymore. And like, he does it himself. And the guy that runs the studio is like, I'm telling you not to do this, but he like can't control Christoph.
Yeah. Philip Baker Hall is like, do not kill him. He's like, if they can watch him being born, they can watch him die, which is such it's like if you didn't think Christoph had a god complex before, he does now.
But just like if you thought there was anything redeemable about him, but he's like, no, I'll kill this life means nothing to me. Like I own this. But he turns off everything, and then Truman dries very quickly. He's just completely dry in the next shot. And one of my favorite shots is him sailing along, and then you just subtly see the shadow on the wall, and he fucking hits into it. And then kind of heart-wrenching is him banging against the wall, thinking he's stuck. And then he just walks along the thing and finds the stairs. And just such a beautiful ending of him, in the nicest way possible, telling Christoph to go fuck himself.
Right. I like he knows what television is, which is also another crazy thing to like give him access to. which is a TV set, and like reruns of I Love Lucy and whatnot, because um, he almost realizes, okay, so he's told that he's the main character of a TV show, right?
Right.
And first of all, he takes it incredibly well. I have to say, incredibly well, because I don't think I would have taken it that well with that information. But once he learns that, he processes it very quickly. He's like, "Oh, every TV show that I know, the main character has a catchphrase." And he's like, "I know what my catchphrase is."
Yeah.
And then he says it, but it's also a perfect catchphrase for like the theme of the movie. It's like it's over, it's gone. You know, it's his sign off, it's his goodbye. I love Jim Carrey's acting when he's touching the wall, and because it's insane. He had a lot of suspicion that his whole life was a lie, but up till that point, there was never any proof, like actual concrete proof. And then once there's almost more peace to it that he was right this entire time than this like existential crisis that we would all have.
I agree, and I think because it wasn't like ripped off like a Band-Aid. He thought his life was normal, and then I'm on a TV show. It was like slowly building. He knew something was off, and then he like gets the explanation. It's almost relief that he's like, I'm not crazy. I figured it out. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like it's a beautiful ending, and the way that like they shut down, and I was just like, what do they run next? What is this? Is this whole studio? Are they done?
Billions of dollars for just 30 years of TV.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you take Game of Thrones, if they ran for 30 years, I wonder how much they would spend. Also, they don't. Here's a bigger picture that you need to think of. The movie ends when Truman leaves the show, which is perfectly fine. It makes a lot of sense. There's actually like Reddit articles about people complaining that the Truman Show, the movie, ends too soon, that we as the audience should see what happens to Truman once he's on the other side. But like really, we are viewing his life through the optics of the show. So once he leaves, we should, that's when the show is appropriate to end. I do have the problem though, where he knows no one on the outside.
Well, except Sylvia lives very nearby.
That's
waiting for this moment. And that initial sex.
No, don't do that.
It's going to be so good, except he'll probably last like 30 seconds because it's like the first time he's having relations with someone that he actually loves,
But think about it, dude. Like imagine just walking out into real life and one person.
Yeah, but thank goodness, I mean, but the other thing though is like he's fine because like he walks out and he's like, I don't have a place to stay. And he's like, let me go to this hotel, and they're like, you can stay here for free. He's gonna get a lot of free things.
That's true. That's very true.
He can write a book. He's got a book deal. He starts the YouTube channel because people love watching him. That's an easy one.
Oh my God. He goes back to it. He's like, you know what? Here's a 24-hour live stream.
Yeah. So a little bit of fun fact territory. Well, first of all, just to say, like, so director of this, Peter Weir, other things he's directed: Picnic at Hanging Rock, Witness, Dead Poet Society, Master and Commander, and The Way Back, which is a movie we will do soon in a theme month. And that's the last thing he directed, was The Way Back in 2010. Like, what the fuck, guys? Why are we not letting him direct things? Like, what the fuck's happening here? Like,
I think you want to.
This is horse shit.
I think you want a Truman Show too. The YouTube days.
No, I just want Peter Weir to direct things, is what I want. Because Master and Commander, The Way Back, Witness, The Truman Show, like, fucking fantastic stuff.
Could you imagine what he would do with like today's technology?
Yeah, maybe that's what he fears. I don't know. So I
Hmm.
talked about how this movie was like a little bit darker. So apparently Peter Weir made Andrew Niccol rewrite this thing like 12 times to get it, a little toned down. Apparently there's a scene in the original script which depicts a staged rape scene witnessed by Truman, and Truman does not go help the actress and just moves on. And then afterwards the actors and actresses are like, "Why the fuck did he not help? Like, what is wrong with this guy?" And they're like, "Yeah, we gotta remove that scene." And then there's several deleted scenes where I talked about this earlier. Marlon does truly care about Truman. It gives him redemption. There's also a deleted scene I talked about. It reveals that Truman, had he not realized what was going on, they were gonna have a spin-off on a 2-channel format, and the second show was gonna be his child. Now, how you do that? Like, are you gonna steal the kid from him? Because otherwise, it's the same show, or maybe like they'll cross paths together, like, the kid will be at school or whatever. I don't know how you make
I
that
think
happen.
I think all you do is just keep him being raised by his father, and you have the Truman Show go on like normal. But then, yeah, you follow the kid to school.
um I guess one cool aspect of this that I meant to mention earlier: the radio station only plays classic music and public domain songs, which makes sense for this movie and for the Truman Show not wanting to pay royalties for this music, so they only
That's
play
true.
free shit. So the directors originally attached to this. Sam Raimi was considered. Brian De Palma was actually under negotiations, but he left his talent agency. And then Tim Burton, Terry Gilliam, Barry Sonnenfeld, Steven Spielberg were all considered. And then when Andrew Niccol was going to get to direct this, he was actually going to direct Gary Oldman
Instead of
um,
Jim?
instead of Jim Carrey.
Wow.
And before we get to the rest of the potential Jim Carrey replacements, Dennis Hopper was actually cast as Kristoff, but for some reason walked off of set on his first day. They tried to get Jack Nicholson to replace him, but he's really good friends with Dennis Hopper, so he refused. So then Ed Harris got the role. Ed Harris in this is very interesting. Like, if you told me about this movie and you're like, who would you cast? I don't think I would ever mention Ed Harris. But then seeing him do it, I'm like, he's perfect in the role. But it almost doesn't make sense that it works given the other things I've seen him in, like specifically The Rock, around this time with
Yeah.
Sean Connery and
Yeah.
Nick Cage. So
Yep.
just interesting. So apparently Samuel L. Jackson was offered the part of Truman, which almost makes like no sense to me. And also like audiences at that time, like when this movie came out and when you're supposed to be having this movie come out, like having your lead be a black child, I don't feel like it's like a different movie.
At the end, when he hits the wall, do you think he's like, motherfucker?
Clearly, yeah, he has to. This has to be rated R. And then I think the only choice that could have done a pretty great job, like the same that Jim Carrey, is Robin Williams, and he was considered for the role. He was one of the first choices.
Robin Williams would have absolutely blown it out. I don't know if the age would have been right at that point, but Robin Williams has like those acting chops that Jim Carrey has with the comedic timing and everything like that.
Well, so this character was supposed to be younger anyway, and they had to like raise the age for like, so it was going to be like an adolescent, like he was 18, early 20s, and they changed it to more of like a midlife thing, although 30 is not midlife. They made the character older to suit Jim Carrey, so they obviously could have done that with Robin Williams. I don't know what the difference in ages are, but yeah,
I just thought of
Robin Williams would have been like amazing in this as well, but I can't see anyone but Jim Carrey in this.
I just had a very dark thought about how they did something within the reality of the Truman Show. Okay. Is that, remember how they were talking about Marlon going off and, being out of town for a couple years or something?
Right.
What if they switched actors?
Well, I mean, stuff like that probably had to happen.
Like the little kid that he thinks he grew up with is actually a different actor than Marlon.
Oh, the kid? And they're like, yeah, that kid fucking sucks.
Yeah, and then he just recast him to a whole different actor that like kind of looks like him. He changed. He grew up. He looks different. Adolescent or puberty or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I love this movie, and I'm glad we talked about it for this long. I think we could have talked about it for even longer, but yeah, I mean, we had to do this one. So
yeah, no, I think a lot of people love this movie, and for good reason too. It's kind of like a timeless thing, especially like where we are in this day and age. It's like that's becoming more and more of a person's reality, and I think if anything, this movie like becomes more relatable as we go on.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we love to watch The Truman Show.